So many people have been speaking about the climate crisis. So many things have been put on paper, but the real question is, why is it that we're still not acting at the scale and speed that is necessary?
The extreme weather events that the scientists have long connected to the climate crisis are becoming far more frequent and far more destructive.
For 150 years, we built up a world based on the assumption that we can exploit the planet for free, and it translates to very dramatic impacts happening right as we speak.
The climate crisis is a threat multiplier, which means it exacerbates existing inequities in our society. The impacts are felt most deeply by Black, Indigenous, and communities of color.
We're living through an explosion of inequality. We need to remember we're on the same planet, and this is the planet that we need to make sustainable for the whole of humanity.
Climate change is impacting food security as well as political stability in many nations around the world. 5 years ago, there were 80 million people marching towards starvation. That number jumped to 135 million. What caused the jump? It was man-made conflict, like in Ukraine, compounded with climate shocks.
No one is as vulnerable to climate change as farmers are. If you talk transformation, the first thing they want to know is, what must I do on my farm?
We know that this transition will require a fast adoption of a lot of new technologies. And the question today is how to find the appropriate way to finance this technology.
To put a number around it, it's an extra $2.5 to $3 trillion a year of additional finance that we have to find in order to get those emissions down.
Financial institutions have a lot of roles to play to bring the advice and provide the financing to make these transitions happen.
Younger generations are demanding a sense of purpose. They want to look at companies and say, I am investing with you all for this reason.
With the upcoming 2 COPs taking place in Africa and the Middle East, we have this tremendous opportunity to put emerging markets at the forefront of our collective response to climate change.
For international trade has to be part of the solution. How do we all get together to talk about a global carbon price that can guide us and help us to decarbonize the world?
The solutions are there. What we need is governments to regulate, to invest, and we need business to act with values.
History will look at us, people, politicians, corporate leaders. These times requires not only solutions, but speed.
There is nowhere else to look than the mirror. We are the ones that need to do this.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Brinley Lear. I'm head of blockchain and digital assets at the World Economic Forum. Today, we are excited to announce the Crypto Sustainability Coalition. It is a public-private partnership that extends to over 30 partners in the space, and we're joined here by several people who I will introduce now. So starting at my far right, we have Josh Nauer, who is the co-founder of Reseed. Directly to my right, we have Lucia Gallardo, and let me make sure I have this right. She's the founder and chief executive officer of Emerge. Directly to my left, we have Amy Westerveld, and Amy is the regional director of the Americas Energy Web Foundation. Welcome, Amy. And then Anna Lerner, who is the CEO of the Climate Collective. So welcome, everyone. Welcome. So let's start by putting out a few questions to respond to. And Anna, why don't we start with you? We'll go this way now. When we think about Web3, how is Web3 changing the dialogue around climate action?
It's a good question, and thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be part of this coalition that was launched today, and to bring more sort of coordinated SDG 17, if you will, a partnership approach to driving some of these issues forward. So I think Web3, so climate change to me, I'm an economist. I worked my whole my whole career essentially in climate finance, project development, some type of touching upon carbon markets. For me, climate change is a massive coordination problem. And I think as I'm learning, I'm fairly new to Web3, to be honest, but I'm fascinated by the opportunities that this technology can provide in terms of helping to coordinate, creating that sort of transparency, increasing efficiency in the systems, and just providing more insight and traceability for actions, commitments, investments. So that's, for me, that's kind of the biggest opportunity here. There's also a layer of decentralization that I think is really interesting. This is something we're just starting to see. We're kind of scratching the surface. I want to say that decentralized finance came a little bit before regenerative finance. That's I think we're all here to talk about today. And I think we can build on some of the building blocks that the DeFi movement, if I can use the jargon, have established. But yeah, those two for me, those are the two: the decentralized aspect of this and the coordination opportunity to create transparency.
And let's follow that coordination aspect. So when we think about how Web3 can encourage coordination, Josh, is this something you would like to speak to in terms of how that is possible with a real use case, an example to help illustrate?
Absolutely. Web3 and blockchain specifically is an amazing technology that has the potential, as you just said, to bring together people and systems that have not really effectively been able to interact before. To address climate change, for example, we have to get to scale. We need massive scale in order to turn things around, to be drawing down more carbon, and in our case, recognize the ecosystem services that farmers around the planet, small farmers specifically, are providing in drawing down that carbon and storing it in the ground over many years. So we use this technology in order to document and provide transparency, both for the buyers of that carbon to be able to see literally the fields that their carbon that they've just purchased is living in, quite literally. And then also for the financial transactions back, so that everybody in the process knows that farmers themselves, the people doing the actual work of drawing down that carbon and storing it and stewarding it, are being fairly compensated and are included in the process. And this is, we feel, a brand new way and a technology that enables really responsible carbon markets, which is something that honestly we haven't seen as much before. And so we're able to go to the next generation of this, and this technology enables it, and hopefully people and society follow suit and use it. And that's the thing that we're all here to do.
Yeah, so similar themes, transparency, coordination. And Lucia, so going back to this broader question of how is Web3 changing the conversation, what aspects do you want to bring to this?
I think a big piece of it is an opportunity to reimagine a lot of the underlying foundations of how we even fund efforts like these. When we think about the opportunities to understand the socioeconomic reasons why someone would invest in something, and reimagining those to be less consumptive, less extractive, so that our new financial markets are underpinned by a more regenerative class of financial instruments, where impact and environmental efforts are not the outcome of making an investment choice, but rather an investable financial instrument that brings about change through its increase in value and its decrease in value. And so I think a real interesting opportunity for us to experiment with these new financial instruments, as well as an opportunity to organize community around it. And we're talking about global communities as a way to really direct social movement and social action in the direction of a change we want to create, which is highly embodied by the incentive structures within the Web3 space. And I think an innate desire to have positive social impact, which is personified by a 30-person coalition that's launching today in an effort to advance these projects and movements in a way that's never before been organized. And so I think really we are at this pivotal moment in time where coordination, transparency, visibility, and market dynamics and financial opportunities can really change the way that we build financial systems of the future.
And community.
Of course, and community.
It all happens with community.
Totally.
And thank you for bringing up the Crypto Sustainability Coalition. Amy, maybe you can speak to that on why are you joining the coalition? What do you want to see happen And how might this change the climate conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to echo what was said earlier. I think we are at a pivotal moment. We have an urgent change. We have an urgent challenge before us, and we need to use all the tools that we have to address that challenge. I think Web3 is an extremely exciting approach to take to climate for many reasons. I think the transparency and the coordination are the salient needs that we can address with Web3, not only with extending the opportunity to support the climate transition to individuals, but facilitating what corporations are doing, what governments are doing with meeting their climate goals, and using this as a tool to understand, how are they progressing towards those and have a higher degree of transparency and reliability in the actions that they're taking. I think that it is important, as we are a pretty nascent industry as Web3, to come together and make sure that we are learning, the best practices that one another are promoting, that we're, sharing our findings, that we're really collaborating on this so that we really continue to harness the innovation and the unique technical properties of Web3 that can facilitate this transition.
And that collaboration is really the core of this venture that we're all embarking on. So thank you. Thank you. I would love to, as we're waiting for some questions, I would love to make this a bit more human and tell some of the stories, right? The use cases and stories. And I will throw it out there, looking at Anna and Amy. I mean, some interesting human stories about how we're seeing some of this work in action.
Yeah, I mean, my first job was in sub-Saharan Africa, and we were doing energy-efficient cook stoves funded by German and Dutch governments at the time. And we tried really hard to find a way to quantify the socioeconomic and climate impact, positive impact of those projects, and worked hard to get those benefits accredited by the gold standard and other accrediting bureaus, so we could then sell them to others to complement the income and balance the price so it was affordable to the communities. I mean, efficient cook stoves have this phenomenal additional benefits of health, obviously, but we weren't even trying there. This was a long time ago. And I think the reality was both for the beneficiaries of the cook stoves, the project managers on the ground, everyone involved in the process, it was long and cumbersome. It was complicated. And we were working with small NGOs in the different provinces of Mozambique. And it was just, this was a market that wasn't really reachable for them. And it didn't feel sustainable in that sense. It almost didn't feel responsible to bring them into this opaque, kind of complicated market. So I would say some of the benefits that I'm seeing directly in this industry right now is the more direct connection. Using blockchain or other types of payment systems, you're actually taking away a lot of the middlemen in these value chains, in this sort of complicated markets, and I think that's benefiting the owners of the projects, or the custodians of the biodiversity in many cases that we're trying to protect. So, as someone who's been in development finance for a very long time in very large institutions, it's very refreshing to see this sort of direct connection with communities and improving their livelihoods more on their terms. Yeah. So that would be sort of a very concrete example. I'm sure with your farmers, you're seeing that as well.
Absolutely. We currently work with 8,700 farmers in Brazil as our starting project. As I said, we have 2 billion to go. But basically what we're starting to see is their engagement in a market that they've never had access to before. Carbon projects traditionally have been very expensive, very time-consuming, and as you said, so many middle people involved that by the time everything filters back down to local communities, they tend to not be the recipients of much of that benefit, even though they're the ones doing the work in the first place. So with our model at Reseed, we are working directly with farmers so that through and with agricultural technical organizations that help provide on-the-ground support for those farmers. And what we're starting to find is as individual farmers are bringing their carbon to market, and we're starting to verify and measure it using the most advanced current technology possible, and on-the-ground reporting from the farmers, so they're engaged in the whole process. There are business partners, and they are the ones driving the value in the marketplace that we are looking to create and creating. So basically, they're the ones that get paid first in our model. When a credit is sold, 50% of it right off the top goes to that farmer, up to 30% goes to on-the-ground community technology support organizations that are helping them think through regenerative farming strategies or other traditional farming strategies that might help increase the amount of carbon that they have in the soil and in the plants. And every year, that measurement is coming back, and they're being compensated with credits every single year for that work that they've done in the prior year. And that model of quick turnaround that instantly provides financial support, we literally just started selling some of our credits in June. And basically, we're already seeing farmers who are doubling their annual household income. And when we're working in the places that we're working with the least connected, the least served farmers in the world, that has a significant impact, obviously, on their ability to stay on their land, which then has all sorts of other co-benefits of biodiversity and regenerative farming practices and food security, which is a big one. And of course, turning around poverty cycles that, they're providing the most value. Why shouldn't they be at the center of that work?
Right. And what I'm hearing is using these technologies to promote efficiency so that you get more benefit to the people actually engaged with the work, which is terrific. But I want to look at the intermediaries for a moment. These intermediaries that have been, and let's just look at carbon credits as an example, they have been doing work to make sure that the work that's being done meets a certain standard. When we talk about Web3, it is switching out intermediaries with technology. So a question I have is, can we swap that out and still feel good about the results? Will they be as good as the kind of systems that we had in place to make sure that things are as they were expected to be? And here, I'd love to open it up. Maybe Amy or Lucia, you have thoughts on that. Josh, I'm sure you also have thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah, I think a big element here is visibility. We have lived in a society that obscures a lot of the decision-making and market incentives and processes by which we can create financial instruments of our current economy. And so when we have the opportunity to design more visibility and transparency into these practices, I think that becomes a real source of trust for people, where even if you can certify up to 80% or 85%, that's still significantly higher precedent than what historically has been an option for us. And so, a lot of my work has been in thinking about how to create financial instruments that can also serve as proof of impact in real time. And so one of our flagship projects, the Eternals, is an example of that, where the financial value is actually interconnected with the idea of how much you contribute to rainforest protection as a cause. And so the more you contribute, the more the financial instrument evolves. And when you stop contributing, then it regresses back to its basic state. And so at any given point in time, it's telling us, how do you contribute? Where is your impact? And that can take place in several forms, including carbon crediting and offsetting. And I think one of the key elements here is this idea that you now can create mechanisms around how you assess those carbon credits. What types of carbon credits is the project you're supporting offsetting? What is the legitimacy and the auditing process for those carbon credits in those marketplaces? And all of that information has previously sort of been invisible information to us, and that's truly an opportunity for us. And also what we get to talk about now is, with that visibility, is how much carbon are we really processing through these marketplaces, and where are the strategies not just to offset but also to reduce. And I think this has been a pillar of what the coalition has been talking about, is this idea that it's not just about offsetting, it's also about reducing. And so we've worked with a partner in France called Tresorio, and they literally recycle the heat that emanates off of the creation of our financial instrument, and then they turn that into a heat source to distribute hot water to public housing units and social and public hospitals across France. So these are examples of ways in which visibility and coordination and all of the things that Web3 sort of brings to the table can create in terms of impact, in terms of trust, and in terms of visibility, to highlight not just what we're doing right and wrong, but also what we can change and what we can reimagine toward the future.
Yeah, thank you, Lucia. Amy, I would love to get your perspective. I also want to open up the floor to Q&A for our viewers. Please feel free to send your questions, and we will deliver those questions to our panel. So Amy, do you have a perspective on The intermediaries question and replacing intermediaries with technology, does this help us improve accuracy or, results?
Yeah, I don't think it's an either-or question at all. I think in some industries there will continue to be a very important normative role that is played by NGOs, that are played by climate scientists and others, because we are tackling a very urgent question, and we want to make sure that we are proceeding to meet this challenge in a way that is aligned with the science that we know we need to align with. So I don't think we're ever going to see normative organizations go away, and I think they'll continue to be important. But I think transparency is a critical ingredient that we will not be able to meet our objectives in time without. And I think about our company, EnergyWeb, works primarily with grid operators and utilities and other electricity industry actors. And one of the challenges that they face is, as we see, for example, automotive markets transitioning from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles, grid operators are ending up with a lot of endpoints on the grid, both consumers of electricity and in some cases producers of electricity, like residential solar or storage. And they don't have a great way of tracking where those are, what those attributes are capable of, or what those assets are capable of doing, what markets they can participate in, how they could be coordinated to be injecting power or consuming power at different times to help balance out our grid, which is going to be increasingly renewable as we move forward. So there's no question of getting rid of the intermediary. We need electric utilities, and we always will. But what we can bring to that conversation and to that objective is the ability to see what's happening at the grid edge so that you can better coordinate it as we move forward. And I think that's the electric industry. Our other work is in green commodities, and we see tremendous demand among corporations, governments, others in decarbonizing, in procuring sustainable products, and we need to be able to meet that need at scale. And I think that's one of the advantages of carbon credits and the other types of instruments that Web3 enables is really meeting that market need so that we can move forward at the speed we need.
It's a really important perspective, and I like so much that it is not either or, it is with. This is everything together. One moment, please, sorry. Just to remind folks to submit questions via Zoom chat. And I know Anna had something to say, and Lucia had something to say, and Josh had something to say. So Lucia will move to you, then to Anna, then to Josh.
I just really appreciate what you're saying about not necessarily removing the role of intermediaries across board, but I think what's interesting here is this visibility of transactionality, visibility of data, visibility of how these market dynamics are taking place, and bringing that out of obscurity changes the way in which intermediaries can truly influence these kinds of markets. And I think it makes compliance easier, it makes auditing easier, it makes trust easier. And so I agree that it's definitely not a case of removing or reducing intermediaries, really more reimagining what their role might be in a marketplace and how this incredible public visibility of data can now become a value add to how we build these markets in much more transparent and effective ways.
Yes.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think the one thing I think a lot about, sort of as for my job, how can we increase the availability of high quality digital environmental assets? So if we want to be realistic about protecting biodiversity and changing the course of kind of climate emissions, and decarbonizing all of these things, we need to find a way to digitize and commodify, in a sense, these goods, these public goods that we all need to protect. And for me, as I've been working on data and technology for as long as I can think of, moving the climate space or biodiversity space onto a more digital, into a more digital world, I think is critical for that, for us to communicate, for us to trace, for us to finance, for us to monitor and verify and all of that. So that's really key, I would say. And I think I'm the CEO of the Climate Collective, so that's a group, an expanding group of Web3 companies, investors, labs, builders, scientists, etc., who are all trying to find building solutions essentially in the intersection of Web3 and climate. And the one thing we really think thoughtfully, and I think this is where we're also hoping we can get help from the Economic Forum and other partners within this coalition, is how do we bridge these two words? Because I agree, it's not either or. We need to bring with us
the massive experience and knowledge that people who have been in the carbon markets for the last 20, 30 years have. There have been a lot of failed experiments. We need to learn from them. Let's not repeat them. So I think, yes, couldn't agree more with what all you were saying. And we're really hopeful for this coalition that it can kind of create that type of conversation, open, transparent dialogue for us to like embed those knowledge and experiences.
I mean, these are new tools. Let's all work together to see the best way to use them. We do have a question, but Josh, you go first, and then I'll raise a question.
Echo what's been saying, but also I think it's important to say that we've slipped, I think, over time. That intermediary has become synonymous with roadblock, right? A barrier that's in our way for path forward. We're all in pursuit of science. We are all in pursuit of environmental solutions that have a market-based approach. And throughout the course of human history, when we've faced these types of challenges before, we've done that by opening up. By, it basically, information and data is like water. It wants to flow. And basically, Web3 is the latest generation, I think, of technology that allows basically that water, that information to flow out to all the places that it's needed so that more scientists, more experts, more economists can actually engage in the dialogue and come up with solutions, as opposed to it being isolated and blocked, and that's, we need solutions that are at the billions of people scale.
Yes.
And to get there, all of this has to flow. We need open standards, we need open protocols, we need excellent debate and exchange, and that is what the scientific method is all about. That's what we're here to pursue, which is exciting.
And to Anna's point too, we also want to learn from mistakes that happened before. So this is now additive. I do want to go to a question that we received, and it's about the merge, which we can see who wants to answer that one. As the dust settles from Ethereum's merge last week, what changes do you see taking hold across the broader crypto industry related to this change? So I think this is really going to the core of energy consumption, moving to more sustainable ways to close blocks on a blockchain.
I would love to take that one.
Amy, please.
So I do think, with the merge, and congratulations to everyone who's involved in the merge, I found that not only impressive, but personally very inspirational. I think with the merge, the attention does shift to Bitcoin, which is, the predominant energy consumer when we talk about blockchain. And I think, it is an opportunity for us to move forward in a direction where, perhaps we can move away from revisiting over and over again the conversation of how much electricity does Bitcoin use, and turn more in a direction of, how can we ensure that the Bitcoin industry is following the same type of sustainability best practices as other electrified industries. Bitcoin is a large consumer of electricity. We definitely know that, but being a consumer of electricity is not in and of itself a bad thing. We are developing best practices, as a community, as an industry, as a nation around, how do we electrify these huge new sources of demand? How are we going to meet the demand from electric vehicles, from electrified heating, et cetera? And so I think this is perhaps a pivotal point for Bitcoin, where we move into a more nuanced discussion, not of how big is the carbon footprint of the industry, but what can individual Bitcoin mining operators be doing to operate in a sustainable way and to operate in a way that is aligned with the dynamics of this changing electricity grid?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And Lucia, I was going to turn to you because when it comes to energy usage, there's a lot that you can do around that. And I know that you spend a lot of time thinking about and putting into practice how we use this, I will just kick it over to you because I know you're excited to talk about it.
I love this question. I love this question. Honestly, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. It's really not this idea that we need to supplant proof of work-based consensus mechanisms. I firmly believe that there are certain systems that we need in the Web3 space, like digital identity, like UBI, or financial inclusion initiatives that can only be built on very randomized proof of work-based systems. And so really this question of, where is Ethereum going? It's going to very exciting places that proof of stake can facilitate. But the question really is not a consensus mechanism question. It's really a computing power question. This question is not unique to blockchain. Computing power is used everywhere. This very conversation is leveraging it today. And so the real question is, what do we do in terms of energy sourcing, not just energy consumption? what are we looking at in terms of dependency on fossil fuels? What are we doing in terms of looking at alternative uses of energy? Even moving, you know, a 10K NFT collection today would possibly, just the rendering of that collection would, you know, lead to about 68 to 71 tons of carbon emitted just to render it, not even minting or transacting it. And so by moving away from a fossil fuel-based economy into one, let's say France or a Scandinavian country or Iceland, that have maybe hydroelectricity or nuclear options as primary sources of energy, you can reduce that down to about 20, 21, 22 tons of carbon. That alone is a significant change. Still not enough in my opinion. But then you have other steps you can take, right? Which is this idea of creating new sources of energy. Digital heat is something that we haven't experimented with enough, and yet we can take heat that is, you know, emanating off of these servers. Companies like Dresorio, they transform it into a heat source. You can use that to heat water. You can use that to create hot air and support farming initiatives, or you can do it maybe even to condense water and create new sources of water. So there's a lot of possibilities with the kinds of ecosystems that running a blockchain, you know, ecosystem requires, that allows us to experiment and set new precedents for new types of energy, for ways in which we can better use existing and renewable energy sources. And I think also for pulling stranded energy and using examples like Texas, where you can play around with how much energy is consumed and when it might benefit society directly in case of an emergency. So really not a question of energy consumption, but a much more nuanced, as you say, conversation about what we're doing on the energy front, because at the end of the day, what we're building is a very digital ecosystem, a very digital economy, a digital society in which the entire world can participate. And that is going to require energetic consumption. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It actually offers us more opportunities to include the world's populations. And that's essential too.
And to expand the conversation, I like how you're talking about the full life cycle of energy, right? It doesn't end with powering the computer. You also think about the heat that's generated. Are there alternative sources that we can really mine in some ways?
I think there's an opportunity to come at this from a slightly different perspective too, which is to look at what this has brought about is a question of what do we value, right? So if Web3 and cryptocurrency and all the rest is supposed to be an exchange of value of some sort, right? The creation of something that has value that the rest, that others might want to trade. I think it's worth looking at history and looking at other cultures. You know, for example, indigenous economics, which is really, quite frankly, the old school cryptocurrency, if you will, in terms of how value was generated and exchanged and still is in many cultures around the world. And I think when we're looking at how do you prove what you've done, how do you show that you trust, how do you exchange a value with others, we have to all admit we are so at the early stages of this in terms of a digital form of this replacing in some way other things that have been done for thousands of years by humanity. And we should be looking beyond, quite frankly, just proof of stake versus proof of work and looking at other forms of value exchange. And that's the type of work, honestly, that we all need to engage with. You know, what does a nature-based currency mean? What does a construction-based currency look like? What, you know, all these different things can be quantified in different ways. And we need to get creative, I think, about how we approach these things. So I totally agree on all the energy issues. Of course, we need to deal with this, and I'm not minimizing it in any way. That's the here and now. But where we're going, it is very likely that, you know, nature-based systems, for example, biomimicry is a concept that we need to look to, because nature is the most advanced and very clear system of data storage and dissemination and exchange of value that exists. And if we can mimic it in other ways, those are going to be where the winners are in these emerging technologies.
Yeah, natural-backed currencies are really interesting. I wish we had more time to explore them, because I think a lot of it is about storytelling, what that looks like. That's because it is something that is, it's different. It's different than what we have today in many ways. Yes. So in terms of wrapping up, we have about 10 minutes left. And so wanted to go to the panel to highlight things that you're excited about coming forward with the coalition, engagement you would like to see with the community, calls to action, and Anna, if you want to, want to start, no pressure, but yeah, just calls to, yes, please.
Calls to action. Well, so I would say like reach out to us. That would be my call to action. Reach out to us, others in the coalition, others who work in the space, to learn more. This is very new. I love your comment just now about nature-backed assets. I think a lot of our members are building on a layer 1 blockchain that's carbon negative and called Cello. I was super curious about it in the beginning because they're trying to back their part of their treasury with nature. As in, we've backed the dollar with gold. Now we're trying to back it with nature. We haven't figured out how to do that exactly yet. We're all experimenting and trying. But if people are curious and want to help out, I would really encourage everyone that's listening and tuning in to reach out to us and connect with all of us. I'd also say, I think one of the things that's opportunistic, or maybe I want to give this emerging industry a little bit of time as well, a little bit of patience, a little bit of time. We need entrepreneurs to drive innovation, to be creative, to rethink the systems, rethink how we do things. And we need to let them kind of do that for a little bit and not just pose all the challenges and all the complications that we know exist in the bigger system. But then we need larger institutions like the World Economic Forum, like the World Bank, like commercial banks, like other investors to come in and help these solutions to scale. So I think the marrying of a lot of innovators, a lot of creative people, a lot of brilliant organizations in this coalition, and sort of the weight and the experience in bringing things to a more general market of the World Economic Forum is really exciting. It's one of the reasons I'm here, and I'm so appreciative of this initiative.
Thank you, Anna. And it's a really good point. This is not just for the crypto community. These are tools open to everyone, and we want a wide diversity in this discussion. Amy?
Yeah, I would echo some of what Anna said. I think, we are a young community, as you said. Crypto is young. I've been in crypto for 5 or 6 years, which I think in crypto years is about a century. But I think that, we need to return to the earlier point, move away from this conversation about, disintermediating systems and move towards a reality where, we're learning much, much more as we get more serious about climate action as a country, as a world, about the tools that we actually need. And those tools can be quite complex, that the objectives and the ways that we need to decarbonize are quite complex. And so I think, the crypto industry needs collaboration from established NGOs, from climate scientists, from utilities, from those industries that are on the ground doing this from day to day, so that we make sure that these really innovative and unique tools that we have are applied in the right direction.
I love that point.
Yeah.
I love that point.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons I'm most excited about the coalition is really the fact that a lot of us that are founding members of it can really put out a lot of the lessons that we've learned in our experimentation. And I think that the call to action would then be for people to take those and really use them in learning lessons and innovating better. And I'd love to see people come back and sort of contribute their own results to experimentation, because that's how we build a collective conscious. That's how we build a collective information repository that can serve sort of the wider movement for more energetically efficient digital systems. And so I think both in terms of the coalition and what we all have to offer together, it is this knowledge base, and then using that to just motivate and allow projects to freely run with it and build better. I think that would be the most exciting thing for us. And I would also encourage people to do that with a lot of transparency. So our team meetings are actually held on Twitter so that everyone can participate. And I think that that's a standard and an opportunity that we can all sort of get behind together.
Thank you for that. And Josh, a minute, and then we're going to wrap up.
Excellent.
Yes.
I think the amazing platform that is being provided here is for a multidisciplinary approach, right, to all of this. I come from the business sector and am thinking about, a good business solves specific problems with a very specific solution. And so, it's exciting to see in the world of carbon, for example, food companies and personal care products companies that are actually working with farmers and wanting to have a much more direct connection with them through insetting, for example, that this technology actually helps enable. And so, the ability to bring together and connect together, solutions in this space with the best practices and understanding of all the others that have been out there that have done it before us and are on the bleeding edges of what might happen next. That's the exciting part of this work. And I think probably I'm seeing nods of agreement, but it seems like this is why we're doing this work.
This is why we're doing
to move
this
it forward.
work.
And so we want people to join us in it.
Yeah, thank you. And please join us. Thank you to our audience. Thank you to our panel, Josh, Lucia, Amy, Anna. Thank you so much. And we appreciate you joining us today.